Emmanuel stood by the gate, his heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, his first day at boarding school. For years, he had heard stories about the adventures that came with boarding school life, but nothing could prepare him for the reality. His mother fussed over him, adjusting the collar of his white shirt. "Be a good boy, Emmanuel," she said softly, her voice tinged with worry. "Remember everything we have taught you. Stay out of trouble." "Yes, Mama," he replied, trying to mark his nervousness with a confident smile. The school compound buzzed with activities as students, both old and returning, greeted one another. Emmanuel was assigned to the junior dormitory, a large hall filled with rows of iron bunk beds. He quickly found a spot and began unpacking his belongings, trying his best to avoid the curious stares of older students. Little did he know this new beginning would set the stage for a series of events that would alter the course of his life forever. The first week at the boarding school was overwhelming for Emmanuel. The strict routines, endless rules, and the ever-watchful eyes of the seniors made him feel out of place. As a junior, he quickly learned that seniors were to be respected, sometimes even feared. One evening, after the evening prep section, Emmanuel was approached by Senior John. He was one of the most popular seniors, known for his charm and commanding presence. He was tall, with a confidence that made everyone step aside when he walked. "You are the new boy, right?" John asked, leaning against the dormitory door. "Yes, senior," Emmanuel replied, his voice trembling slightly. John smiled, but there was something about his gaze that made Emmanuel uneasy. "Come with me," John said, leading him to a quiet corner of the dormitory. Over the next few days, John began to take a particular interest in Emmanuel. At first, it seemed harmless, helping him with chores, giving him advice, and sharing stories about life in the school. Emmanuel, grateful for the attention, started to feel a sense of belonging. However, it wasn't long before John's behavior took a different turn. He began asking Emmanuel to stay back after lights out, making him run errands late into the night. The night began like any other. The dormitory was quiet except for the occasional whispers and rustling of bedsheets. John had called Emmanuel to his bed, offering biscuit and soda, a rare treat in the school. As they chatted, John placed a hand on Emmanuel's shoulder. It was a gesture that seemed friendly at first, but it longer than Emmanuel was comfortable with. Before he could react, John's action escalated, leaving Emmanuel paralyzed with fear and confusion. "Don't tell anyone," John whispered afterward. "This is our little secret." Emmanuel returned to his bed that night, his heart racing. He felt a mixture of emotions: shame, confusion, and a sense of loyalty to John, who had been kind to him. He didn't even know how to process what had happened or who to turn for help. In the days that followed, Emmanuel withdrew into himself. He avoided John as much as he could, but John always found a way to corner him. The fear of speaking out weighed heavily on Emmanuel. He didn't want to be labeled as a troublemaker or risk being punished for accusing a senior. Over time, Emmanuel began to normalize the situation. He convinced himself that it was just part of a life in the boarding school. But deep down, the experience left scars that would shape his relationships and identity in ways he couldn't yet understand. After graduating from secondary school, Emmanuel thought he could leave the past behind. He buried himself in his studies and tried to focus on building a future. However, the emotional scares lingered. He found himself drawn to relationships that mirrored the power dynamics he had experienced with John. By the time Emmanuel was in his 20s, he had accepted his dual life. Outwardly, he was a successful young man with dreams of starting a family, but privately, he struggled with feelings of guilt and confusion about his identity. Emmanuel met Ada during his final year at the university. She was everything he had ever wanted in a partner: kind, intelligent, and full of life. Ada had a smile that could light up a room and a laugh that melted Emmanuel's worries. Their courtship was filled with laughter, late night conversations, and dreams of a future together. For the first time in years, Emmanuel felt a sense of normalcy. Ada made him believe that he could have the life he had always wanted: a lovely family and a stable home. When Emmanuel proposed to Ada, she said yes without hesitation. Their wedding was a joyous occasion, filled with friends and family. As Emmanuel stood at the altar watching Ada walk down the aisle, he promised himself that he would leave his past behind and focus on building a happy life with her. But the shadows of his past were not so easily banished. Marriage brought Emmanuel a sense of fulfillment, but it also brings out his internal struggle. While he loved Ada deeply, he found himself unable to suppress the feelings and urge that had haunted him since his boarding school days. Emmanuel began living a double life. He had a network of discreet relationships with men, carefully hidden from Ada. He justified his action by convincing himself that it didn't diminish his love for her. At first, Emmanuel managed to keep his secret well guarded, but as time went on, the guilt began to eat away at him. He found himself withdrawing from Ada, often making excuses and spend times away from Ada. Ada noticed the changes, but dismissed them as a pressure of work and family life. Unknown to her, Emmanuel's secret life was out of control. He had 6 gay partners. Each relationship was carefully hidden to avoid suspicion. Emmanuel's guilt drove him to seek change. He tried everything he could think of: prayer, fasting, counseling, but nothing seems to work. Each time he resolved to end his relationships, he found himself drawn back into them. I just had to try harder, Emmanuel told himself after every failed attempt. But the harder he tried, the more defended he felt. One day, he confided in a close friend from his university days. He advised him to seek professional help, but Emmanuel hesitated, fearing the stigma and the possibility of being exposed. His internal struggle began to affect his relationship with Ada. He became distant and irritable, often snapping at her over trivial matters. Ada tried to support him, but she felt helpless in the face of his unexplained behavior. One evening, while Emmanuel was in the shower, Ada noticed his phone ringing on the bedside table. She glanced at the screen and saw a series of messages from an unknown contact. Curiosity got a better of her, and she unlocked the phone. What she found shattered her world. The messages were intimate and explicit, leaving no doubt about Emmanuel's double life. When Emmanuel emerged from the shower, he found Ada sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone in his hand. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Emmanuel," she said quietly, "what is this?" For the moment, Emmanuel was too stunned to speak. Then the weight of his secret came crashing down. Emmanuel sat beside Ada, his head in his hands. He knew there was no point in denying the truth. Slowly, he began to recount his story, starting with his experience in boarding school. "It's not something I ever wanted," he said, his voice trembling. "It started when I was a boy. I didn't know how to deal with it. I have tried to change, Ada. I have tried so hard, but I don't know how." Ada listened in silence, her heart beating with every word. She couldn't believe that the man she had built her life with had been hiding such a deep and painful secret. I love you, Ada, Emmanuel said, tears streaming down his face. I don't want to lose you. Please help me.